Hi there Commanders, and welcome back to this 5th video in this series of starting out with Elite Dangerous. So in this video I thought we would cover off an Odyssey on foot mission, because that also includes then covering a planetary landing as well, which is something we haven't done yet. So the best place to find Odyssey on foot missions is from a space station concourse. So you disembark from your ship, you head up to the concourse, and then if you head up to one of the computer terminals and select mission board, and this gives you a list of the Odyssey on foot missions that you can select or choose from. The other place that you can actually get missions from then is actually from some of the NPC characters that are hanging around the space station. So if we walk up to one and talk to them, they will then give you the details of the mission, and you then can choose to accept it or not. So in this example then, the mission is to fetch a canister from a settlement. Threat level is 0 and the reward is okay. I think it's a good one to start with, as it will give us a chance to fly to another system, do a planetary landing, walk around the settlement, and explore some of the features of an Odyssey on foot mission without any kind of threat to have to deal with. So at this point we should talk about equipment then. So for Odyssey on foot stuff, you will need to equip your commander with different types of suits based on the type of mission that you're undertaking. So there are 3 types of suits then. There's the Maverick suit, which is your kind of general all-rounder, the Dominator suit, which is primarily for combat, and then the Artemis suit, which is primarily for exploring. At this stage, probably the only suit you're likely to need really would be your Maverick suit, so I advise picking up at least that one. Now a little side note about Odyssey on foot missions. A lot of them really can be quite tricky when you've just got the basic grade 1 type equipment, which is including your suits and your weapons. To tackle some of the slightly harder missions, you ideally need better graded equipment. The problem is that you can't get better graded equipment really unless you do more ground-based missions, so you can unlock the engineering and the materials required to upgrade your equipment. So it's a kind of a chicken and egg situation. I guess the point would be to start off with some nice easy ones and to start getting some experience and moving around on foot and work up from there. So we go back to our ship, we lock in the target destination, we take off, we narrowly avoid having a crash on the way out of the space station, and we head into hyperspace. And so we've arrived at our target destination, and when we look in the navigation tab we see that most of the destinations are unexplored. This means we're missing nav data. So one way of dealing with this then is to lock onto the Nav Beacon for the system and supercruise to the Nav Beacon, and we come out of supercruise, we lock onto it, and at that point we'll start, once we reach a reasonable distance, we will then automatically just download the system data, and at that point then our navigation tab becomes fully populated and we can find our mission destination, lock it in and go into supercruise. So then, planetary landings. There are several phases to this. So we approach the planet in supercruise, and as we get closer you can see the kind of orbital guidelines start to appear saying how high you are above the planet. And essentially what you want to do is you want to maintain a fairly shallow approach, so you're not going in too steep, because otherwise it will drop you from supercruise if you do that. So we maintain this angle and we head down towards the settlement. So this is basically known as orbital cruise. And then once we're close enough, we'll enter into what's called the glide phase. So we're no longer in orbital cruise, we're in glide phase. So we're gliding down at this point towards the settlement. And if we get this right, it'll basically keep us in the glide phase until we're basically a few kilometers out, and then it'll drop us essentially out of that phase. And at that point you're in normal flight. And once you're within 7.5 kilometers of the station, you can request docking permission, and then you line up with the pad as you would do in a space station, and you land using your normal controls and thrusters. So planetary landing is relatively straightforward. The key part really is not to come in at too steep an angle, because it will drop you out of supercruise more quickly, and then you've got a longer run down to the settlement. So it's at this point that we disembark from the ship, and I happen to notice that I failed to equip my commander's loadout with the Maverick suit that I bought earlier. So note to self, basically, don't forget to check your commander's loadout before you disembark from a ship. As it happens, I can do this mission with just the basic flight suit on, so no worries there. So the mission objective then is to fetch an item from Container 2 in the settlement grounds. So to find Container 2, we need to find a computer terminal. So we can identify where one is on the HUD in the top left hand corner. Now as we're walking around settlements, we're going to come across guards patrolling the settlement. You're going to see them wandering around, and essentially they're there to keep the peace, and if we're there legally it's fine, we don't have too much to worry about. But I guess there's a few things we should bear in mind. Firstly, a guard may approach you and ask to scan you. Essentially they're just checking that you're not carrying anything illegal or that you are not wanted. So when this happens, just stop and let them scan you. If you try and walk away or you ignore them, they're going to consider you hostile and they could attack you. Secondly, weapons awareness. So if you have a weapon out, the guard will see that as a threat. They'll warn you to put it away, and if you don't comply, things could escalate quickly. So make sure you've always stowed your weapon when you're in a settlement, unless you happen to be in a combat zone or a mission where you're expecting some trouble. And then lastly, as long as you're not doing anything shady, like trespassing, hacking or carrying illegal goods, you're going to be fine. Just keep an eye out for the guards and don't give them any reason to suspect you're up to no good. So as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a computer terminal, and in this case there's one that happens to be inside a building that we can access. So we walk up to the terminal and we are looking for where container 2 is located in the settlement grounds. So we find the location, we lock it in, and it's now on our HUD as a destination that we can navigate to. So before we leave that building, I noticed that there's a suit recharge socket on the wall. It's usually a good idea if you're passing one by just to give your suit a quick recharge so it doesn't run out of power. So we find container 2. The mission instructions give us the key code, so we enter the key code. And we obtain the item, and that's it. We simply walk back to our ship, allow guards to scan us on our way back if we need to. And we get to take off, and basically taking off from a planet, it's not really much different from taking off from a space station. Once we're out of range of the settlement, we're able to go into hyperspace straight away. So we make the hyperspace jump back to our destination, because obviously we've got to go back to the mission provider to collect the reward. We have an uneventful landing. And we disembark from the ship and we wander back up to the station Concourse. And we find the mission giver, who's an NPC character, and we collect the reward. And the reward that we've chosen this time is a material reward. And I'll explain why. So essentially, as I mentioned earlier, in order to get better equipment, essentially you're going to start to need to engineer at some point in the future your equipment, including your suits and your weapons. Now, in order to engineer it, you're going to need to collect various items, some of which are materials. So it's usually a good idea right now, if you're not particularly desperate for credits, to start to obtain materials ready for engineering in the future. And that's it, Commanders. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we are going to cover off purchasing a new ship for Tiberius Valerian, and then outfitting it appropriately. And then at that point, we're then going to cover off some exploration and some trading at the same time. So join us in the next video. Thanks for watching, train hard and fly right, and I'll see you in the next one.